Good evening, board members and Wauwatosa community. We are here as a division of Pupil and Family Supports to review our year-long data from the 22-23 school year for our Behavior and Discipline Data Review. My name is Luke Pinion, your Chief of Pupil and Family Support.
I'm Stacy Klum, your Director of Special Education.
I'm Shonda Holland, the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. And Emily O'Connor, Director of Student Success.
As you may remember, in February, we presented our first semester data in regard to behavior and discipline statistics in our school district disaggregated. We're here to close that loop and also talk about second semester and kind of put the entire year into perspective for you. You'll have slides to follow along with you today, and we're going to start just by talking about data accuracy, which is an important starting point for us. Like we said in February, we are still working really hard on the accuracy and the integrity of the data. How we enter data, when we enter it, with what frequency, with what behaviors. The disciplinary framework has been helpful to that end. But as you see here, tonight you're going to hear about discipline referrals, suspension data, manifestation determination meetings for our students with disabilities, our high-level discipline, hearing, and expulsion data, all disaggregated by school, race, ethnicity, EML, and free and reduced lunch. And we continually work really hard with our teams to make sure we're aligned and standardized in terms of our accuracy of our data to make sure we're making valid comparisons across schools and sites year by year.
As you all are aware, the disciplinary framework was introduced during the 22-23 school year. The framework was created to ensure that all schools and staff provide equitable and consistent disciplinary efforts. Please lend your attention to the first part of the framework. We have updated coding events and event types and refined the framework based on the feedback received from our principals.
We wanted to take a minute to remind everyone just the distinction or the delineation between the definition of discipline and safety to make sure we're really understanding the two differences there. We like the definitions from the Aspen Institute, which you can see there what that institute is based in. But school safety is really about the school-related activities that keep students safe from that overt and subtle instances of violence, bullying, harassment, or drug use. Whereas student discipline, where we're really focusing the conversation for today's presentation, is our system of rules and expectations, our strategies we use for behavior, and the consequences that we're using to help maintain order in our schools, both proactively as well as in response to misbehavior.
Okay, so now we're about to launch into some slides with quite a bit of data in them. So feel free to pause this recording as you take a look. There's a lot of information to take in, especially on these next two slides. Keep in mind that we currently have about 6,985 students enrolled in the Wauwatosa School District for last school year. These next two charts depict all the office discipline referrals, so anything that was sent to an administrator to handle by school and by grade level, all on the same chart. An office discipline referral typically means that the behavior has risen to a level where an administrator needs to be involved, and the result is some type of disciplinary consequence. And also keep in mind, as Mr. Pinion said, that while we have made improvements, data practices are still inconsistent from school to school and even across teachers. We are making lots of steps to build a stronger data infrastructure so that we do have more consistent and accurate reporting. And we're looking forward to, over the next year, to be able to report out more accurately the annual trends. If you skip to the next slide, we have semester two's data. Again, you may want to take a pause and compare this with semester one. Note that overall there is a reduction of 104 major office referrals from semester one to semester two. And we'll continue to share these trends as we move forward.
So in addition to the office discipline referrals, we want to make sure we're disaggregating the data to really look at our students that may be disproportionately identified in special education. So we want to make sure our data is being pulled up to how are we sending those students to the office disproportionately as well. So going back to a comparison, the data that you saw in the last two slides that Emily shared with us is being pulled up to, the blue would be semester one, the orange would be semester two. So this shows a comparison of the number of office discipline referrals between the two. And we are going to focus in on our 7 key categories: our Black students, due to our disproportionate identification for Black students; gender; students with disabilities; English for multi-language learners; students qualifying for free or reduced lunch, residency, and grades. So this data does indicate fewer office discipline referrals for 5 of the 7 categories from first semester to second semester. And this is while we were also encouraging people to report information and share with us what's happening in your classrooms. So not only were we encouraging more data and more data coming to us, we did have a decline in the number of referrals that students were having.
Great. This next graph highlights students who have had multiple disciplinary events resulting in an office referral, so an administrator-managed behavior, or multiple suspensions. So just a quick review from some of the information we shared in February, that national trends suggest that disciplinary action like an office discipline referral or a suspension can be effective for many students in changing behavior when used judiciously. For some students, multiple office discipline referrals and suspensions alone will not be sufficient to adequately change behavior. So a guideline when reviewing office discipline referrals is to consider students with 2 to 5 incidents or office discipline referrals at moderate risk, and those with 6+ or 6 or more office referrals is needing some significant intervention. Therefore, over the last school year, we focused a lot on professional learning and greater consistency and problem-solving processes with putting behavior intervention plans in place for students to address their unique needs. I'd like to call your attention to the graph in the middle with the number of students who had 6 or more office referrals went from a 71 first semester to 47 in second semester. And while we still have lots of room to grow, we do want to lean into that good practice as a system. This data depicts out-of-school suspensions by grade level. So again, keep in mind that some incidents would have involved multiple students. And so some of this data may actually be reflective of multiple students being involved in the same incident. So this is just counting the number of students involved.
Okay. This next slide highlights the number of students with out-of-school suspensions during the course of the school year. The number of students with out-of-school suspensions was 217. Of those 217 students, 150 were males, 64 were identified as receiving special education, 118 qualified for free or reduced lunch, and 56 were non-residents. The data indicates a slight decrease from semester 1 in all areas except the data for non-residents.
Before we show a little bit more data on our next slides, we just wanted to take a moment to give you a few notes. First semester, when we presented in February, we shared a lot of data around fighting. We experienced quite a few fights in September and October, and we really wanted to highlight where the state was around that. You'll still see some of that today and a reduction, which is really something to celebrate in terms of second semester. But we also are framing some of our data around this term of violent behavior or violent suspensions, which really are incidents of harassment, fighting, physically endangering behavior, gun or weapons, or sexual assault that do result in exclusionary discipline or out-of-school suspensions. So moving forward, you'll be hearing that term violent behavior, which really represents those categories that resulted in suspension. So when we look at our fighting, you'll see here quite the decrease from 60 to 48 fights that were categorized as incidents that resulted in suspension being more of a reciprocal nature, where it was a back and forth between individuals or groups of students. Harassment stayed steady, about 6 cases in each semester. We had a drop in physically endangering behavior down to 38. And then possession, ownership, use of a weapon went to 10, which weapons will generally result in a hearing as well. But those range from a student accidentally leaving something in their backpack to something of more egregious nature like mace or something like that. So there is a spectrum when it comes to weapons as well, but you can see that change there. Overall, there was a reduction in violent behaviors from semester 1 to semester 2.
On the previous slide, you may note that overall the number of students involved in a fight resulting in suspension went down from 60 to 48 students. From first to second semester, the number of fights resulting in suspension decreased by students that are identified as Black, receiving special education services, free or reduced lunch, and non-resident. The percentage of male students that fought had a slight increase during second semester.
Okay, now we're showing the number of students involved in a fight resulting in a suspension by grade. So you'll notice some trends in a positive direction, and yet still some areas of growth that we need to pay attention to.
And board, please see on the slide the seclusion and restraint trend data over time. As you can see, seclusion and restraint from Act 125, board, you do receive a yearly report about seclusions and restraints. For the 22-23 school year, there were situations in a few of our buildings that maybe were happening in the 21-22 school year that we proactively worked with the teams to help limit some of the use of seclusion and restraint. So there was a significant decrease in the numbers of seclusions or restraints that did occur at Washington compared to previous years. And in our other buildings, none of the buildings had seclusions and restraints that got to the level of previous buildings. Through all the work we have done with proactive behavior intervention planning and collaborative problem solving, despite having students who may demonstrate dysregulation and may demonstrate the need for additional supports and different needs, we are able to work together to prevent some of the spikes that we've seen in the past. So you will please also see your seclusion restraint report for more details.
We're going to shift gears a little bit and move into more high-level discipline or administrative hearings and manifestation determinations. As a reminder, the administrative hearing is a process when certain high-level behaviors happen that is essentially a pre-expulsion process. Where we sit down at the district office with the administration, often a counselor or a student services member, and the family and students to process what happened, the impact, and understand where we might need to move forward for the student and for the safety of everyone. Whereas a manifestation determination meeting is a special education process when considering a potential change of placement as a result of discipline. And we navigate each one of those case by case very individually. You will see here in our total table of administrative hearing and manifestation determinations that there were a total of 86 meetings of that nature this school year. 74 of those were administrative hearings. I'm going to break that down a little bit in a minute, but you can look across the line there to sort of see the demographics. You will notice different pockets of our continued disproportionality that we'll highlight as we move through these data. Here you can see one celebration from semester 2 when we look at and break down these numbers of that 86 for the total is that we went from 46 in semester 1 for fighting or that physical endangerment to 21 in semester 2. And that is not by coincidence. There was a lot of really hard work done by our school teams, our school leaders, our teaching staff, as well as district office to really help create safe environments for students and to help get ahead of these physical altercations. You can also see the breakdown by residency, open enrollment, as well as by race. And really what jumps off the page here is our disproportionality for our Black students, accounting for 74% of these hearings. You can also see the breakdown by gender. We saw slightly more females in our administrative hearings, and then we are disproportionate as well in our free and reduced lunch population in terms of our socioeconomic status. They were about 50-50 percentages of individuals in meetings in those categories. And then ELL, we had 100% of our students who are not our multi-language learners. And then lastly, by grade level, I won't read all of these to you, but you can see sort of the outliers there in 7th grade, which does mirror the data we reviewed earlier, where you sort of saw that pocket of 7th grade being a little bit higher, and that 11th grade accounting for 17 of those hearings. And then outcomes, important to also look at what happens after a hearing. So in semester 2, we had about 10 of them return to school on different really explicit conditions in terms of what the expectations are moving forward. There's really unique planning that happens in terms of what is going to be expected and provided for each student, as well as supportive measures that will be provided to the student, such as student services time or the completion of the Aurora Student and Family Assistance Program. And then 18 in semester 2 did transfer to alternative learning environments. And that ranges from our virtual academy to different special education placements that we have with other providers and schools. And then there were withdrawals as well as hearings, 3 from semester 2, a total of 7 for the year. When you look at the trends on the next slide, you can see here that we have many, many more notices of expulsion and actual expulsions than we have in any year prior. In fact, it's about the last 6 or 7 years combined equals what we have this year, We will stress over and over again that expulsion in isolation does not solve problems, and it can create some community concerns as well. But it's important that we put all of our interventions and pieces together, and that we don't just lean on one area or one disciplinary measure as the solution. You can also see here in the graph for expulsion trends, just again, another visual comparison of how many notices have gone out, and then that subsequently results in sometimes withdrawals that we make agreements for, or moving forward to the board for an actual hearing. And then further broken down from the year in terms of expulsions, you can see the categories that made up the actual 5 expulsions that went through, and it was for endangering the health and safety of others. And then Emily and Sean will talk a little bit about our greatest needs here.
As we summarize our greatest needs, we are paying attention to the behavior data, and we've determined our greatest needs are accuracy of consistency of data entered across schools, our disproportionality in discipline for our Black students, students with IEPs, and students receiving free and reduced lunch, progress made toward school-level support, but more work. We must improve overall in our accuracy and consistency in the data entered so that we are able to create systems that aggregate and disaggregate our data.
We also want to just increase our use of research-based interventions, increase our professional learning outside of just relying on punitive discipline to change behavior, especially for students who with chronic behavioral needs. This really brings us back to strategic objective 3.1, which is resetting or redefining a framework that includes PBIS, restorative and trauma-sensitive practices, and relaunching that across our system with all schools this year. Additionally, we are looking at system-wide, so across our district with all staff, providing professional learning for all of us to engage in terms of designing culturally responsive learning environments or classrooms and school-wide settings. So that will be happening as we launch the 23-24 school year. We also want to lean into the continued development of our multi-level systems of support framework. So in November, we brought to you the request to add the 2 multi-level systems of support coordinators. They are ready to go this year and are going to be working with multiple stakeholders in our system to look at how we team, to look at how we review data, and how we look to proactively support students, and then when they demonstrate need, make sure that we're putting plans in place that are responsive to their needs.
And then I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to also speak to our alternative education programming development. It was a very big gap I noticed right away, and my team noticed coming into the school year, is that our virtual academy, WBA, became this de facto placement for a lot of students who were at risk or needed disciplinary placements. And it wasn't really working well. It was designed as a virtual school, not as an alternative or at-risk school or placement. So we are proud. We've had a team working for over the last semester with many project teams to build an alternative program. We are calling it the Champions Program. It's going to start as more of a disciplinary placement. It will be infused very heavily with social, emotional, mental health supports, academic and career planning. We look forward to providing the board more information about that in a written update at the end of August, as well as you'll be able to see the manual that will help sort of articulate what that program is all about. But we are very excited to better meet our students' needs through that program versus solely relying on WBA. Then you can see our high impact practices. I won't go through the entire list. I think worth highlighting and kind of echoing off of what Mrs. O'Connor said is we are really excited about the professional learning series around the culturally responsive learning environments that we're able to offer in a very thoughtful, integrated way throughout the entire next school year for all staff. That's going to be a really key piece of empowering our teaching staff in a consistent and standardized way about how they're setting up environments, their routines, procedures, expectations, and how they respond to different misbehavior in classrooms. And again, you can see the list here, many other areas of work that are going on in tandem with this. This is certainly non-exhaustive, all of which do relate to our strategic plan goals area 2 around diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, goal area 3 around mental health, and 5 around culture and community. And we'll talk about how you can help. You've seen the slide before.
Yep. So with everything, it takes a village. We all need to work together to make sure our community and our schools are safe. So just reminding your family or your students to If you see a problem, be proactive. Say something if you see something, and be contributing people to a positive school environment. Let's take our schools back and let's really see ourselves as leaders of our schools to be positive learning spaces. And parents, please continue to work with your building administrators. Continue to reach out and say, I'm concerned about my child. Can you help? Can you help me figure out how we can make sure my child has the supports that they need to feel safe in our schools? Or I have concerns. Maybe there's something that parents can suggest or provide to us that will help us to improve our spaces. And then teachers, continue to create a well-planned out learning environment for all of our students. Love that discipline so that we are able to track it and use the structures that we provided to help that accuracy of that data so that we can make sound decisions.
And then also our school administrators continue working on those building level processes that support student learning and responding to different behaviors that might occur in the discipline associated with that. Keep developing those genuine connections with students, which we do have a lot of amazing relationships that are being built between our staff and students and administration. And then continue implementing the district's disciplinary framework, asking questions, asking for clarity, and reaching out to us when help is needed. For the Board of Education, continue developing, refining policies. I know that's been a heavy lift this last year. We'll continue into this year. Allocating appropriate finances to support student wellness, student safety. You've been great at honoring our requests around safety this last year. Calibration on what incidents you do expect to see that might rise to the level of expulsion, and seek to understand the processes we're using for student support, which we hope in tonight's presentation for our special board meeting, you'll really get a better understanding of how we move through those processes. And then for the community, right, it takes all of us to create these safe cultures in schools, but contribute to that establishment of an atmosphere in which the students' rights and the duties of students and policies are acknowledged, and working with us and understanding us as well in terms of our communication and letting us know when things aren't going the way that you expect them to, so that we can also understand and reflect on that. So with that, we would offer questions for you tonight, and we will open the floor to further discuss all of these data and all of our actions. But thank you for your time.